And we start our discussion this morning on AM Live. This is The Point. We welcome your opinion as well on Twitter. The hashtag is AM Live. You can tweet me at Trevor Ombija at AM Live NTV. We'll read some of the views as they come in. We're going to talk about several issues here in the country, starting from the presidential petition, the Ruaraka killings, Raila's return, and everything else you need to know. Of course, the presidential petition, we now know that's going to start at 10 a.m. The ruling is about to begin at 10 a.m. As soon as that happens, we'll take you there live. I want to introduce my guest to you, beginning from my farthest left, Joshua Kutuny, Member of Parliament, Cherangani. And we also have Dr. Shem Ochuodho, who's the global leader, Kenya Diaspora Alliance. The farthest seat you're seeing over there is we're waiting for David Osiany. He's a political analyst. In fact, I see him walking in as soon as he gets here. We'll definitely just usher him straight into the panel before we start the discussion. And also, we have Professor Anyang Nyong'o, Governor Kisumu, joining us as well for this discussion. Gentlemen, thanks for making time as we wait for David Osiany, who's just walked in. And Prof, I'll start with you. What are your sentiments regarding the events that happened over the weekend? This will also give you a chance to condole with the families.
Well, first of all, I really would like to express my sincere condolences to the families who lost their dear ones in a very senseless act of lawlessness and murder. As you can see, the party leaders, including Prime Minister Raila Odinga, went there to consult with the families and to condemn this very shameful act. Now, I think it's all really started when the Prime Minister arrived on Friday. I think, to me, it was senseless for the government to do what they did by preventing us from coming into town and holding a rally at Uhuru Park. Because I do remember when we were in the coalition government, Ruto and Uhuru used to go to The Hague, the whole bunch of MPs and so on. I think Kutuny was involved in this. And when they came back, they traveled through Jogo Road, addressed people, went up to Uhuru Stadium and addressed the rallies. Over and over again, the coalition government never interfered at all with what Ruto and Uhuru did. And so I really find it kind of unnecessarily senseless to have stopped a whole prime minister with tear gas and bullets and water cannons. I was there killing people senseless. And then to add insult to injury, these killings that occurred in Babadogo and so on. So you cannot really leave the government out of this. That's a responsibility. I was in Kisumu on Saturday, and I, of course, had a whole series of events to undertake in Kisumu, which were prearranged, including Gor Mahia receiving their cap and so on. And during lunchtime, a take-off time, as I was having lunch, to watch the sending away of my dear friend, Professor Gakuru, I was really not pleased with the messages that leaders passed at that funeral. I think those are the kind of messages that led to what happened on Saturday night in Babadogo and places like those, because you really can't talk like that. I mean, I watched somebody I respect very, very much saying that God ordains leaders. If you're ordained to be in the position, you should be content to be in position. And that's the kind of thing I used to read in books about feudal times. And if that is so, then even the Zimbabweans could have argued that God ordained Mugabe to rule for life. So I really think that this kind of talk, very careless talk when people are in power, can lead to extremely unfortunate incidents like we saw in Babadogo. Okay. Yesterday, I was here again in Nairobi. I was attending some kind of party where my close friend of mine and a relative had held for friends in Ongata Rongai. And I started getting calls from Kisumu that tensions were building in Kisumu because people were seeing what was happening in Babadogo. And they wanted to take revenge on people from the Kikuyu community in Kisumu. I had to call them. I had to go on radio. I called radio stations and say, look, the people living in Kisumu have nothing to do with what's happening in Babadogo. Please don't hurt innocent Kenyans in Kisumu just because you think that our relatives are being killed in Babadogo. And after talking in 2 radio stations, Sky FM and Namlulwe, and talking to the police in Kisumu, that situation was contained.
Okay.
But I really think that, again, I've just seen the Deputy President talking there, kind of implying that it is the opposition that has incited what happened in Babadogo. Again, extremely responsible statements, trying to polarize the nation. I don't think a government should take it as its responsibility to polarize the nation by what the leaders say all the time.
Many would argue that it's really a back and forth because the opposition says the government should take responsibility. Now the government is also saying these are politically instigated fights, even though the police are saying that it has nothing to do with politics, it's just crime.
No, you really have to look at the chain of causation.
Yeah.
In social sciences, when things happen, you have to look at chain of causation. If the Jubilee government had behaved like the coalition government used to behave, when Uhuru and Ruto came from The Hague, they were allowed to address people from the airport to Jogo Road to Uhuru Park.
Okay.
Nothing would have happened.
All right.
But to make a decision before Raila arrived here that the meeting in Uhuru Park is banned and no reason is going whatsoever. I mean, the best thing would have been to say, if there are reservations about the meeting, call the leaders, say, look, gentlemen, let's discuss.
Okay.
How are you going to deal with this?
Okay.
But that is how democracy works.
All right. Let's bring in Dr. Shem on this. And I was asking for your sentiments over the events that happened over the weekend and also a chance to condole with the families.
Yeah, Trevor, allow me to join Professor Nyong'o in condoling the bereaved families. You know, for some of us, these are just statistics, how many people have died. But for certain people, there are more than that. These are parents, these are children, relatives, and so on and so forth. It's quite unfortunate that we continue to lose lives. We shouldn't be losing any more Kenyan lives in this electoral season. I also agree with Professor in the sense that the high-handedness wasn't necessary at all. In fact, I wonder who the security advisors for government are, because they tend to, from experience over the years, we worsen the situation when you bring about brute force to stop demonstrations. But having said that, allow me also to compliment Governor for having cooled down temperatures in Kisumu. Two wrongs have never made a right. It wouldn't be right, and I am glad that people of Homa Bay, which is where I come from, have remained calm despite the pain that I know they go through when they see there are people being manhandled in Kawangware, in Babadogo, and other places. We should never revenge, because the Bible says revenge is mine. Yeah. It's God who revenges. But in this particular case, we should forestall. We shouldn't be putting Kenyans through what we are doing. Okay. But at the same time, I think opposition also needs to be a little more responsible, because when it comes to wanting to enter sensitive areas of the airport, I think that's where, to that extent, I think there should have been restraint. As a matter of fact, if you ask me, are we in a campaign mood? Why did we need to welcome the head of opposition? But that's their right. The Constitution guarantees it. Yeah. When they do it, they should, kind of battles, running battles we saw with people in police uniform. The trouble is, at these times of fake news, you don't know whether pictures we're seeing were genuine Kenyan pictures. We don't know whether the people we're seeing in uniform were actually genuine policemen, or not. But whatever the case is, at the end of the day, the responsibility to guarantee security of persons, Kenyans, and their properties solely lies on the shoulder of government. And I want to make a passionate appeal to my elder, Dr. Matiang'i, who is an elder in my church. Adventists have done very well. I'm hoping that he's going to live to the word of God, because that's what's supreme. We've seen what happens to leaders. Leaders come and go. We will also be here, and we'll go one day. But what legacy are we going to leave behind? Okay.
Joshua, your sentiment?
All right. Okay, thank you very much. But I take this opportunity to say that it is really regrettable that the situation that we are as a country, people killing each other, or people being found to be, and then having running battles, it is very regrettable. And I will start first of all. I think I was here with my friend here some times back. And last week again, I was in another interview. And I think I made it very clear. And I like it putting it very clear as it is. And my position was clear last week when I said that it doesn't cost anything to allow these people to receive their leader all the way to Ruaraka. Because I talk from a political point of view and a bit of experience, and at the same time also as a student of politics. And I've studied Raila very well. And I did say last week that if you want to immobilize Raila and to make him irrelevant, then you give him a peaceful environment. But if you want Raila to be relevant and mobile, then give him stumbling block or give him violence. He thrives on that. So, last week when he arrived, there was a very good opportunity for him to have from 10 to 12 to 11 to 12 to 12 and to 2 to finish his thing and go home. And this is what I've advocated. And I still advocate it up to today, that that space must be created for people to ventilate what they have.
Okay.
But at the same time, as much as that is my point of view, as much more here has put it right, two wrongs doesn't make it right. See the activities that also followed. Because the mayhem, the destruction of property of innocent people by the people who are escorting Raila, again cast Raila in a bad light. It brings out also the other side of them. Because as much as there is running battles between them and the police, it doesn't give them right to go and destroy someone's property, to destroy someone's M-Pesa, to burn someone's vehicle, and to snatch that old lady the bananas, which are source of her livelihood. So I expected them also to conduct their supporters with a bit of decorum. So then by end of the day, then they will say, the police wanted violence, the police used force, but we restrain. So the people who are complaining even today are not even the police as such. They are ordinary people who are maimed in the process by the same people who are now escorting Raila Odinga. So, and you can even see what happened. There was tension and there was also these so-called killings in Papadogo. See the reaction in Kibera at the same time. People looting shops in Kibera at the same time. See what was happening in Professor County, in Kondele. People started propagating roads and vetting people on the road, stopping their vehicles and saying, you know, trying to, it was profiling. So I think if I was them, we will make sure that we conduct our activities with a lot of decorum. See what also happened with the Member of Parliament, with my good friend. The information that came out was that shooting, yet in real sense it was the commotion, perhaps maybe each was trying to find space, and in the process much more was injured. You see, so I think as much as there are those challenges arising from the conduct of the police, there is also the other side of the opposition demonstrators, what they are trying to do. So it is going to be very important for the government side to be also careful, but at the same time, it is important for opposition to conduct themselves with decorum. So then they can have a legitimate issue to raise.
All right. Let's bring in David on this. David, your sentiments over the events of the weekend.
Well, Professor Anyang Nyong'o had alluded to what happened on the 9th of October 2014 when President Uhuru Kenyatta was arriving back into the country. And all of us at least have read, if we're not there to witness, that Moi, who was very high-handed, allowed Matiba's supporters to go and receive him from the airport in 1992. And the same Daniel Toroitich Arap Moi, who was believed to be extremely high-handed, in 2002 allowed the supporters of Mwai Kibaki to go and receive their leader from the airport. Yeah. I have decried time and again the seeming imbalance in the application of law, so that the law is created specially for some group and it is very brutal and atrocious for another. What happened on Monday was absolutely uncalled for. There is no way to even rationalize it. It was unfortunate. I was here at the time the former Prime Minister was arriving into the country. And I asked myself, look at the disorder now. Because when you push people to the wall, they have very little option. And then now we would wake up to the ethnic cleansing. I won't call it anything different. To the ethnic cleansing in Babadogo.
Even though the police dispute that fact.
The police can dispute.
They're saying they're still investigating and it's nothing with ethnic clashes.
The police can dispute it, Trevor. But when we wake up to 4 Luos dead, then it is what it is. Okay? And the police may dispute it like they have disputed many others and not resolved them to date. But that's just what it is. And it is not new. Since 1969, we have had a systematic killing, particularly of the Luo community. Let me call it for what it is, because that's what it is. And it didn't matter whether they were on the side of the government or they were on the opposition. Tom Mboya was not on the side of the opposition when he was killed. Robert Ouko was not on the side of the opposition when he was killed. And I've met a couple of people who enjoy proximity to the head of state, who are from the Luo community. And each time I have met them, as a Bible student, I have told them to go read Esther chapter 4, verses 13 and 14, where Mordecai gives a stern warning to Esther that Haman has given a decree that all the Jews have to die. Don't think you will be safe because you're in the palace. Because when these deaths finally come, they will come for you too. So be the voice. Maybe the Lord has put you there for such a time as this. And I think we need to agree that this has been wrong and call the leadership of the nation and tell them that can't we get to the end of this? Must people be met with brute force? You would talk of chaos in Kondele and Kisumu. One time, in the same day, there was terrible chaos in Lari, with the youth going even to the police station. But what happened to Kisumu was glorified as a worse sin than what was happening in Lari. So we have had time and again the media and the political class trying to brand a community a particular way, when in fact their reaction are not peculiar to themselves under the circumstances that obtain at the moment. Okay. And so it was unfortunate. It is uncalled for. In fact, I want to make a very sincere request to Professor Nyong'o to erect a museum, a memorial museum, just like the Holocaust Memorial Museum, where we can then enlist those people of the Luo community who have lost their lives in such an unfortunate manner in the quest for justice in this country. Okay. That said, I think it also behoves the leaders to rein in on their supporters. But as I want to say that, you leave no space for people to be orderly when you throw law and order out of the window. The police ought to be the ones who, take care of the laws. They ensure that the laws have been upheld and there is absolute order. When the two throw out that, when you have the killings and the maimings, when, for example, you let this, grow to a point where an MP is also shot, so you shoot the supporters and then you shoot the person they have believed in to represent them, then you're trying to create chaos. The natural thing then would be retaliation, which would be uncalled for. Because indeed, as Dr. Shem Ochuodho says, two wrongs cannot make a right.
Okay.
We must be the people who seek peace and seek it indeed.
All right. Prof, and I have a problem with this branding that David Osiany is talking about, because the side of the police say that the procession was fine, and we saw for some hours it was just okay, until looting started, damaging of property started, then they had to retaliate.
No. Look, Trevor, I was there. Please, you know, it's good to, it's very, the security forces, it used to even happen in colonial times.
Yes.
You go and kill Kikuyu peasants in the countryside, okay? And you come and give a story that they were raiding a settler's farm. If you have read the book, A History of the Hanged, you will see it. The same tradition is now here. The police now blame the victims. Look, what happened was that when we came out the airport, we were following Mombasa Road. We reached a point where they have blocked Mombasa Road. So we come on this side, on the side of cars going to the airport. We follow that one. We find it blocked again. We take a detour. We look and take another route. Every time we tried to get into town, we found a block by the police, or whoever they were. They could be police, they could be Bugiki, as Osiany said, and as Kutuny also said. If they are in those uniforms, you don't know who they are these days. So, and then, you know where the first, there was the first breakage. I was there myself, okay? The place where they started pouring water on us by water cannons. I was there. And then, not from us who came from the airport. Some youths came from I don't know where. Because I was there, I saw it. They came in a group. They must have known that there was sodas in that particular shop. How can you from Kawangware know a soda shop somewhere in Eastland? You wouldn't. They came there and started break. I saw it myself.
So those were not part of your supporters,
no,
that's what you're saying?
And the police were standing there. They didn't do anything. In the meantime, before long, there were bullets, and we had to go down in our cars as the bullets passed by. When I woke up and I looked like that, I saw a young man dead. That's when we decided to drive off. I mean, within this hail of bullets. When we went to the corner, taking the corner like that, my own car was shot by a tear gas canister on the other side. So look, and even you, the days you are coming from The Hague, if the coalition government had stopped you anywhere, the same thugs would have come and looted, because you don't know where they come from. Now, when I was at the airport, Shem Ochuodho says they should have been decorum at the airport. There was a lot of decorum. I was there. I was leading part of the reception team. As usual, as a VIP, I went to the place where you should be getting tags to go and meet the people inside there. The guy took me at another office, there were about 4 of us. We sat in that office for half an hour. There was nobody. Then he came back and said his boss was to give us these badges, was not there. So we went back to where he came from. By the time we got there, the Prime Minister had come out. So then they allowed us to go in and receive him. I restrained anybody from going near that door. In fact, I put them in a queue, saying, okay, when the Prime Minister comes out, stand in a queue, he will greet you. But by the time he came, so many people had come. He himself agreed to use an emergency door, go straight to his car, not address people in the airport, and drive to town. Because he didn't want to address people at the airport. There were too many there. And he didn't want to obstruct operation at the airport. What more discipline do you require? What more decorum do you require? When we ourselves were doing our best to get to town, and this government of goons are the ones who prevented us from going. And I would not even doubt that some of those people were throwing stones at us. They were throwing stones at us, not just even the police. Yeah. Our people cannot throw stones at us. My car's window was crushed as we were coming into town, here in Mudhurwa. Our people could not throw stones at us. Mudhurwa was terrible. A hail of stones. Okay. See? So this thing, there must be a proper inquiry. Don't make simple statements that the opposition should have disciplined itself. It is the responsibility of the state to create security, not opposition. We don't have an army. We don't have a police. We don't have a secret service. Okay. The police should have known the route, studied it, and told the Prime Minister, this is the best route to go to town. It was not for us to create a route. But if you prevent us from everywhere, it means you yourself want to create trouble in this country, not us. So don't make such a responsible statement, please.
Joshua, I'll give you a chance to
And by let me tell you something. You know, if you read Shakespeare,
yeah,
Shakespeare tells you gives you very good advice. In Henry the Fourth, Part 1, Act 3, Scene 2, when King Henry is advised, if you want to survive on this throne, busy giddy minds with foreign quarrels. I think Uhuru and Ruto have been advised, if you want to survive on this throne, busy Kenyans with tribal quarrels. So these tribal quarrels they're creating Babadog and so on are just ways of surviving in power.
Okay.
Nobody's creating that but the government. I know that.
All right. Let's take a short break here, and this is the point. When we come back, we're still talking about the events of the weekend. We'll also talk about the presidential petition very briefly because it's happening at 10 a.m. We'll take you there live as well. Stay with us. Well, thanks for staying with us. This is The Point on AM Live. My guest is still with me, Honorable Joshua Kutuny, Member of Parliament Cherangani, Dr. Shem Ochuodho, Global Leader, Kenya Diaspora Alliance. We have Professor Anyang Nyong'o, Governor Kisumu, and David Osiany, Political Analyst. We're talking about the Ruaraka killings and the aftermath of the return of the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga at the airport. And Joshua, we were speaking about this issue of decorum, but also it's a very tough balance for the police because the professor is saying there's a group that came in and started looting. The moment these groups merge, how do you expect the police to differentiate who is who?
Yes, I think I had made it very clear earlier. And of course, I understand where Professor is coming in from, because with a lot of feelings. Because in politics, you know, because when you combine many political activities, losing the presidency and all this, and up to the point now that then a bit of frustration sets in. So those such people need to be handled with a bit of care, because then they are very fragile. And that's why I've been advocating also for the police to restrain sometimes when handling these people, because they've already lost. And they know now that the future is appearing bleak and dark, because you see Uhuru is now likely to be the president, you know, anytime. Now, Professor forgets that this is not the first time we are experiencing such the act of violence. And I've always said this for the people who mind to listen from the opposition side, that you see when you are making a statement, you must also make sure that those statements doesn't go beyond provocation. Because if you listen to the statement of these people, it has all been provocation. That you see wakirusha tutarusha. Then you incite your supporters. So that when you have an activity and it turns violent, then it becomes difficult for people to differentiate if you mean well. I am with them completely on this issue of Raila being given, you know, a bit of space as an opposition leader to do whatever he wants to do. But at the same time, I am against the people who unleash violence in the process. And he cannot run away from it. That there are people, and you could see them with stones.
Even the police had stones.
And you could see them. But you see, we have already said that two wrongs doesn't make a right. Professor, we must engage on these issues as leaders who want to find a solution. All of us, we are saying, perhaps maybe some of the actions of the police must be condemned. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that we must glorify the people who are carrying stones, because that is perhaps maybe that's what the point you are putting across. The people who looted. And you could see all the way where they were going through. You could see destruction of property. You could see destruction of property in everywhere. There was retaliation, there was reaction. In every place where you've got their supporters. Yeah. So, in putting across a solution, is that as much as they complain about the police, and as much as we condemn the police action, they must also reached out to their supporters and tell them that this is not the way how to do it.
Yeah.
I expected them also to condemn the actions of their supporters.
Okay.
And then say, going forward, this is what we need to do.
Okay. Dr. Shem, and you see, the interesting thing is that the opposition leaders are saying their own supporters would not really stone them, which is logical. But then again, the others who came into the group, how do you differentiate these two?
I mean,
that is where my main issue
Trevor,
is.
why are we being stoned?
Trevor,
I mean, really?
because I wasn't personally there.
But I'm
so
sure
I
you
wasn't,
saw it.
I wasn't an eyewitness. You know, when you see people, and these days, when you're really not sure what you see is what's really there, and that who you see, whether it's NASA or police or somebody else, it's a bit difficult.
If
But
you saw it on
having said
NTV,
that,
that's what was there.
Allow me, because I haven't complimented Honorable Kutuny for his re-election, and also that I think he's one of the very few level-headed leaders with a lot of humility that's coming from Jubilee and is coming out. I consider him a moderate, and that's commendable, and we need to have more of such.
Yeah.
I was talking to my good friend, Honorable Kabando, who was one of the first people to say we need to dialogue. And he's saying, well, he was saying, but we were expecting our moderate Nyanza counterparts also to reach out and say the same.
Yeah.
But of course, I know there is capture. So people from Nyanza who are in NASA or Moso DM, I don't expect them to come out of the cocoons and say this is not right. Let's dialogue, because dialogue is what we need. So I was asking Honorable Kabando, then you guys went a little quiet. He said, well, we were coming out, but our colleagues didn't come to meet us midway.
Yeah.
I think my challenge to the moderate, and I think in this regard I compliment Professor again, is one of the few governors who goes out. You know, the kind of thing he was doing with Nandi County and Kericho County, and I'm hoping was not reprimanded for that, because that's the right thing to do. But how many of his colleagues are looking beyond the short term?
Yeah.
Because many are just concerned about their comfort zones. So to that extent, I compliment Honorable Kutuny. You may get a lot of heat for that, but please keep going, because time immemorial has proven that people like Gandhi, people like Martin Luther King, like Mandela, in the short term, you suffer.
Yeah.
But in the end, posterity judges you right. So, and I also wanted to disabuse the fact that my good brother David was saying that it's Luos and perhaps only them who have been victims of political or rather strange deaths. I think, of course, the Luos have felt heavy brunt in this regard, the Mboyas, the Ukos, and so on. But we've also had people like the Adungosis, so the J.M. Kariukis, the Bishop Muges, the Enoch Magaras, the George Captains. So the point is that it doesn't matter whether when a Kenyan life is lost, whether it's from this community or the other. And we are in a state where I think we support what the religious leaders are doing, the Sabika group, the interfaith group, the Catholic bishops. That's the direction to go. Let's heal the country. By doing our own ethnic profiling, we're not helping, we're worsening the situation. Okay. It's in this regard that as Tushauriane wa Kenya, a group that I belong to, which is multisectoral, we're working together with the religious leaders and the private sector and other segments of society to have a national dialogue conference in February next year, but a pre-conference, a pre-dialogue conference in December. And we are hoping that leaders from across the board in politics, in business, in civil society, and all the others, time is of the essence that we must say, we must acknowledge that there is a problem. Kenya is staring at a problem in the face. We need to talk about it. We cannot sweep it under the carpet. We need to dialogue and converse about it and find a common solution. But in the meantime, let's call for restraint on all sides. I can understand the pain. I have personally been a victim of ethnic profiling and persecution. But that notwithstanding, I still hold the position that, you know, you don't meet, I don't believe, as an Adventist, I don't believe that you meet fire by fire.
Okay.
Yeah, you defeat fire by bringing water to cool it down.
To cool it down, okay. I want to bring up the soundbite by the Deputy President, William Ruto. He was speaking earlier on. We just played it a few minutes ago concerning this particular issue that's happening. But before we get into that, David, I wanted to get your sentiments on that. How do you get the difference between these two people? Because when now another group, and we're talking, you were the one who was talking about branding here. And most of the time, whenever there's a procession, there's always chaos. It is always alleged that it's the police who start it. It is also the police on the other side say it's the NASA team that starts it. How do you balance these two? Trevor,
I think one thing that we share with Honorable Kutuny is that we were student leaders. I was a chair of SONO.
Yeah.
Me too.
And Dr. Ochuodho. And I know for a fact that when students would go out there to try and express themselves in a demonstration, then they would be infiltrated by others, just so that what is achieved was to try and, you know, make people believe that students can never have a peaceful demonstration. It's a fact, it happens.
Yeah.
When there is demonstration in town, there is a high likelihood that those who would want to achieve the continuation of branding NASA support base as violent would send in people to attack. So that is there. But for me, the question is, what happens when you block out all the routes? I want Honorable Kutuny to agree with me that it was not right to even stop the supporters from the onset going to the airport. It was not right. There was no justification. Because, as I said, the past 3 instances and many others have allowed people to go. Yeah. Now, if at all it was the NASA supporters that reacted by doing what they did, it was a reaction out of anger. Does that make it right? It isn't right. Yeah. It isn't right. But when you push people against the wall, you leave them with very little to do. Okay. Now, secondly, like Dr. Ochuodho, I'm a very staunch Seventh-day Adventist. Yeah. Dr. Maraga, Dr. Matiang'i belong to my faith. We are students of the Bible, teachers of the word. We believe that if it's in the Bible, it's for us. Yeah. When I said here that the people who have paid the highest price are the Luo, it's just that. Okay. There are no two ways about it. Others have died in the struggle. But the greatest price has been paid by the Luo, wrongly so. I will not color it nicely as Dr. Shem Ochuodho wants me to. And it's not because I am urging, I'm trying to agitate and you know, infuriate that community. It is my plea and appeal to the leadership of this country going forward. When I was SONO chair, I was the greatest, you know, defender of the Kikuyu when they were being killed. When Oscar Kingara died, if you played that footage, as a student leader, I decried that. I detested it. It was wrong then. It cannot be right now. I can't even support the death of the people of other communities, much less as I would mind. They're all the same. Death is death. Trevor, today, if God forbid you passed on, this media house will replace you. The next morning, there'll be someone on that seat. But these are the people, who the family has lost. The family can never replace those deaths. So let's not call it anything else. It's unfortunate, and we must.
You all want to jump in on this. Allow Joshua, then we'll come to you, and then to Professor. Yes, you will. Allow Joshua for a moment. Yeah.
I wanted just to mention that in terms of executions, perhaps Somali brothers and sisters, we don't have statistics. I wouldn't be too quick to say it's true Luos have suffered like many other communities. Okay. But for now, without statistics, I empathize with what has happened in the northern province. Even what happened in Wagala and all that were political. So, but I think the point is, even Mombasa, when they talk of Mombasa, see Kenya, the MRC and so on, it's not out of nothing. Okay. Kenyans have been persecuted and marginalized and discriminated. In fact, even in Central itself, We all know the talk of the north of Chania River and the builder Kagias and so on. So there has been a problem. Let's address that problem without ethnicizing.
Honorable Joshua.
Yes, my statement that I wanted to pass to my friend here is that you must be very careful when you talk about community, when you talk Luo, because it is double-edged sword. It can also isolate the same community from other communities. So if there is atrocities committed, it must be atrocities committed to Kenyans.
Correct.
At this time and in point, we are not talking about Luos being killed. I think it has not reached that point, and we must be very careful. And I will appeal. Professor here has history of what happened in 2007. It started from that point. So Mheshimiwa, my good friend here, is a young man. Before you start mentioning about communities being targeted, first of all, let us understand the political environment that we are and try to find a solution to the same.
Okay.
Because we don't want a situation where we are going to provoke people so that then they can continue fighting. Okay. Because also there is also political tactic are there, and it is applied every day. Who knows? People also might decide to say that perhaps maybe you are provoking, so then this thing takes a political direction where violence is going to be there every day to an extent that the country becomes ungovernable. So then you use your community to cause violence. So we must be very careful. At this time, Mheshimiwa, it has not reached that point where we will talk about Luos being targeted. Okay. Let's just talk about, you know, there is some fighting going on. Okay. No,
but
something must be done.
I see Professor shaking his head on that.
I think let's not degenerate into an argument that will not end. But let me say the following. I think Joshua Kutuny is wrong to profile the opposition and saying what the opposition is doing is desperate because who is going to be sworn in, now we are kind of frustrated. I mean, that kind of profiling is equally bad because I heard somebody talking actually at that funeral too, a very good friend of mine, who was saying, well, to be in the opposition, to be in government is God ordained. If you're ordained to be an opposition leader, be content with that. I mean, look, this is fascist, by the way, pure fascism. Yeah. When you say that to be in a position is God ordained, like Mugabe telling Zangara in Zimbabwe, you be content, be a position, you are ordained by God to be there. It's very dangerous because times change.
I think, Professor, my statement was very clear.
No, so look, yes. So don't sit in a comfort zone and think that the election of Uhuru is the be-all. Look, we in the second liberation came into these things not to get into government. We came to liberate Kenyans from oppression. And so long as oppression is not there, I really don't care who's in government. That's why we are fighting for constitutional change. And I'm talking about dialogue, by the way. When the Prime Minister came from Boston, soon after the last election, after the Supreme Court case, the first thing he did was to call for dialogue. He wrote a letter to the President, okay? And the President, first of all, agreed, this is a good thing, let's go for dialogue. And then when they went to Uhuru Park for some Ruaraka Day and on, Ruto had convinced the President, no dialogue with the opposition, that kind of thing that Kutuny seems to be saying. Now, look, when it comes to dialogue, I think we have been more for dialogue than anybody else. Recently, Honorable Raila Amolo Odinga said very clearly, I'm willing to talk to the President, provided we are talking about election rules and changes, reforms in the IBC, because this is where the problem is. In order to have a free and fair elections, the rules of the game must themselves be guarantee free and fairness. Okay. The institution that runs that election should not be captured by the government on one side. Right. If that happens, we cannot have free and fair election. Now, if you put your point across so clearly that these are my position, I want dialogue in this, what kind of dialogue we are talking about? Dialogue means you put your point of view very clearly on what to be dialogued about. Okay. Now, if then people say, look, you were ordained by God to be in the opposition, then of course you can't argue because God is not here to put his case.
Okay. Well, I want us to wrap up this whole situation of the Raila's return and the Ruaraka killings by playing two separate sound bites where the Deputy President spoke about it, and also President Uhuru Kenyatta and the Deputy President spoke about this during the send-off of the now late Nyeri Governor Wahome Gakuru, and this is what they had. And after that, joining us also is Dr. Farah Maalim, who's a former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. He'll be coming in to have this discussion with us before we get into the issue of the presidential petition. And we'll talk about the possible outcomes one by one. Say it is nullified, then what? If it is upheld, then what for the country? But first, let's listen to what the head of state and the deputy had to say about the Ruaraka issue.
The hearse carrying the body of the late Wahome Gakuru arrived at the Kagumo High School grounds where the funeral service took place. It was carried by fellow governors inside the dome. The burial service for the late Wahome, bringing together leaders from across the country, including the president and his deputy, who eulogized him as a leader who was determined to bring change in Nyeri and nationally.
Dr. Gakuru was a firm believer in devolution, but he also recognized something that was fundamentally important: that the two levels of government, national government and county government, are not in competition with one another, but are actually complementary. That we need to work together. We need to pool our resources together.
With Gakuru, Nyeri was going to go places. But I am happy listening to the leaders here and listening to his family, that indeed his legacy, his vision will live beyond this ceremony today.
Your love was strong enough to pick us up.
Gakuru has left behind a widow, Catherine Wahome, and 3 sons who eulogized him as a caring husband, a loving father, and a pillar of strength.
I knew Wahome as a lateral thinker, very focused, diligent, resilient. Not possible wasn't something he believed in. Can't be done wasn't something he believed in. Indeed, he was a very sore loser.
We had our laughs and frowns. We had our good times and we had our bad times. You might not be here physically, but you will always be in my heart. I will do my best to make sure that our dream is realized.
You would do everything you could to please us, but only if it was allowed by God.
This man blessed our lives with his immense God-given wisdom, his jokes and wise counsel. I want us to look at the footprint this man has left on this world and question ourselves.
Nyeri Governor Mutahi Kahiga talked about the late governor as a great friend who he will live to cherish. He has vowed to work towards achieving Wahome's dream of a better Nyeri.
It is public knowledge that I am mourning my boss, a comrade, and dear friend, a man known to me just as Daktari, as he has been referred to. His sudden death truly hit me, and I believe the people of Nyeri like a lightning bolt.
Leaders who attended the burial condemned the chaos experience in Nairobi yesterday.
Haikuwa sherehe ya kuonyesha upendo wako kwa kiongozi wako. Ilikuwa ni sherehe ya kupora mali.
Kupiga magari ya watu wengine mawe, hayo si maandamano. Na sisi Nairobi hatutakubali umwagikaji wa damu wa hiyo aina.
I think as leaders, we must be contented for what God made us to be. If God designed you to be president, be contented. If God designed you to be an opposition leader, be contented.
Melita Oletenges, NTV.
Wananchi wengi wamepoteza maisha yao kule Nairobi. Na sisi wote tunahuzunika kwa sababu sio makosa yao. Wananchi wamepoteza maisha yao kwa njia ya kiholela. Na IG lazima afuatilie, polisi ifuatilie, tujue hawa wananchi walikufa kwa njia gani, kwa sababu gani, na ni nani aliwafanya wakapoteza maisha yao. Tunaelewana? Vile vile lazima tuseme mapema na mchana, Nairobi ni ya Wakenya wote. Hakuna mtu ako na sababu, hakuna mtu ako na uwezo, hakuna mtu ambaye atasema ya kwamba Nairobi haiwezi kukaliwa na Wakenya wote. Sisi tunasema Nairobi ni ya Wakenya, na kila jamii ambayo iko Nairobi tunataka waishi kwa njia ya amani, na mimi nawauliza wananchi wasikubali mambo ya incitement ya wanasiasa eti wapigane ndio wanasiasa waweze kupata mambo yao ya siasa, mwananchi apoteze mali, mwananchi apoteze maisha, biashara ya wananchi iharibike.
I know Prof has an issue with that statement, but let's bring in Farah Maalim. Honorable Farah Maalim is just coming in, the former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly. Thanks for making time for us this morning.
Thank you.
We were talking about the Ruaraka issue and the events that happened over the weekend, and I wanted to get your sentiments on it. And do you agree with the Deputy President? He's saying that some leaders are using this particular scenario to incite the others.
No. You know, these are extraordinary moments. We're going through a difficult time in our history. And it needs extraordinary skills and it needs real statesmanship for you to be able to steer. The deputy is playing politics because he's basically trying to play the ethnic politics. Nairobi belongs to everybody. We know that Nairobi belongs to everybody.
But he also urged the police to investigate the killings and bring the
but then
perpetrators to book.
His investigation is, his direction of investigation is to find out who sent those people for them to get killed. You see, it's a very roundabout, no, why did they get killed and who killed them? That's the issue. Most of them died as a result of police bullets. I don't know how many of them were killed by the police. So if this is the time he should have insisted on saying that use soft power. Police must use soft power in this. Don't kill Kenyans. And then say that Kenyans live together in peace. All of you belong to this country and nobody is, all of us are one nation. It's a moment of calling for peace. It's not a moment of trying to, get the divide further and look for culprits and say so-and-so is responsible, so-and-so is responsible. It's the political fever and the political environment we are in, which is very unique. We have not been in this political environment except in 2007, 2008. So what needs to be done? And it's as a result of a process that essentially is constitutional. There was a petition, there was a nullification of elections, there was a repeat election, there was a boycott. And by the way, this is not the first time people have boycotted elections. We boycotted elections as the people of former NFD in 1962. I don't know if you remember that. We boycotted those elections ourselves. So we were not even, if you look at the list of those members of parliament and senators who were elected in 1962, there was nobody from Northeastern Province, not NFD, former NFD. We boycotted it. So we have a history and we can always find a way to deal with by also going back on the experience we've had before. So it's time to try and heal the country. It's time for every politician to try and call for national cohesion, to try and say, let's have the temperatures low. Let us, and you call on your own adversaries. Uhuru should be calling on Raila and saying, my brother Raila, we have gone through these things. We still have issues that are unsettled, I'm sure. But can we save our country? My brother Uhuru. These are the kind of languages that we need from statesmen.
So you sort of agree with the clergy then that if this country burns, it's the two of them will be to blame, because the clergy is saying
definitely, because the buck stops with them. Buck stops with the two of them. There's no question about that.
Right.
But you see, I can tell you one thing. Those two guys are two guys who have the capacity, the goodwill, and the nature, in my own opinion, to steer this country better than we are right now. Uhuru is a peace-loving guy. From the way we get to see the way, because remember when Raila came back from the States after the elections and he asked for dialogue, Uhuru immediately said, yes, we will have a dialogue. But then there's a part of Jubilee that believes that 2022 can only be determined today and it cannot be determined today if there's any dialogue today. You get my point? If there's any coming together of the country today, then 2022 is lost for Ruto. That's basically, to call a spade a spade. And we need that to change. That narrative has got to change. Because when you look at the members of parliament who keep on going on press conferences, members of parliament who are calling on the police to come with a heavy hand, basically, you can't use that raw power. It was possible to use it in the 60s and the 70s, and even the 80s, but you cannot use that raw power today in this new millennium.
Shem,
Yeah,
very briefly, because I want us to talk about the presidential petition and the outcomes.
To concur with the point my elder brother Farah is saying,
yeah.
you know, even use of bullets, you know, a time comes when you even run out of those bullets. So brute force isn't a solution. So we really need to converse here. And I compliment also the Right Honorable Prime Minister for having called for dialogue.
Yeah.
And also the President, Excellency President said, I'm willing to dialogue, but let's do it when the court process is over. I don't think the President has refused to that extent to to dialogue. We are waiting. We are hoping that once the court pronounces itself today, that dialogue will take place.
Okay, let's
the
talk
only
about...
problem. The only one problem where when we talk of, when we give conditions and say we only want to dialogue about IBC or electoral reforms, I think that's, for me, reducing it, making it too little, because our problems are more than IBC.
Okay.
That's one part of it, but they're only a small part of it.
Okay, Honorable Kutuny, let's take this forward. The presidential petition 2, the ruling is happening today.
Yes.
There are only two possible scenarios.
Yes.
Either the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta is upheld or it is quashed. Say it is upheld. How does the country move forward? Well, let's talk about those scenarios one by one.
Of course, Uhuru, I will go with the Uhuru sentiments. Yeah. When the acceptance speech, President said that I'm going to respect the rule of law, and I'm going to respect the verdict of these people. So when you have a matter in court, of course the options are either you win or you lose. Yeah. Of course, if it is going to be held, it is good for Uhuru Kenyatta, because he's been one of the people who participated in the elections. Yeah. And of course, you know, as Mheshimiwa has put it very clear, I've worked also for Uhuru, and I can confirm that, and even the Deputy President. They know also the magnitude of having a country, leading a country which is disunited or divided nation. So immediately it is upheld. Of course, mechanisms are in place to make sure that the country remain united. Governor here will attest to that. When he was voted as governor for Kisumu County, not everybody voted for him. But after being elected, he swore to be a governor for everybody. For the people who voted for him, and for the people who never voted for him. Okay. And for the people who will never even vote for him. So I think, because in politics there are those people. Yeah. So it is an issue of, once the president is declared, and eventually having been sworn in, then Uhuru will have to move in speed and consolidate the nation so that the nation remain united. Okay. For Raila, he, of course, is a statesman. He will be respected as a leader of the opposition. I've always respected Raila. Yeah. And I always tell people that Raila must be given his space as a statesman in this nation. He has contributed a lot. But at the same time, he must also admit that there was an election that people participated, and having been, if the court is going to uphold and hopeful, then Uhuru becomes the president for 5 years. And then they go back to the drawing table. If he still have energy, which I feel like he still have, then he can prepare for 2022. And he can come for us for advice. I think that one I can give for free, so that we move forward. All right. Now, on the sentiments from some politicians, both political divide are accused for making inflammatory statements that can jeopardize the peace. If you listen to President Uhuru Kenyatta, he calls for peace. He calls for a process to be finished. If you listen to the Deputy President, he did say that this matter has been investigated. Let us go to the root cause. Both sides, they should be very careful on their statements, both from Jubilee side and, of course, the NASA side, going forward. Right. I think our statements will matter the most if the country is going to remain united. Okay. But I'm hopeful that Uhuru is going to consolidate the country immediately after his election is upheld.
If it is
upheld.
Yes. Professor, should we now devolve these solutions to moderate governors like yourselves? If, say, the first scenario that the election of President Uhuru Kenyatta is upheld, should we look up to the governors to ensure that their bases are solid, knowing that the country can still move forward? Or how do you see this playing out?
Personally, I hold a completely different opinion. Okay. My opinion is that the government architecture in this country is the problem. Elections, no elections, unless we deal with that architectural framework, we still have these problems. And this is what happened in 92. We thought we had multi-parties. So we went to election. And the result of the election was not democratic governance. It was something else. It took us 10 years from 92 to come to 202 to elect a reformist government, which was NAC. But even NAC itself found because of internal contradictions, to come out with an architectural framework for democratic governance. In 2010, finally, in I think October 2010, we had a new constitution. But we now realize that the architectural framework for a democratic governance, even in that constitution, is a problem. So we must revisit that. I personally have a solution which I think will work. I do believe that a presidential system of government is wrong for a country which is highly culturally diverse. That's why India adopted a prime ministerial system and a parliamentary system. So did Canada, so did New Zealand. And most democracies in emerging nations which have adopted parliamentary systems have been able to deal with crisis much better. Look at Jamaica. Jamaica had a big problem. Yeah. If it had a presidential system and Manley and the others could do whatever they like, Jamaica would have fallen to pieces. So you can, if you go into history, you'll find that emerging nations with presidential systems usually get a lot of problems. Even the US, the oldest democracy, recently realized that a presidential system in a culturally diverse nation, especially during economic crisis, presidentialism doesn't help. Okay. So I think that this particular crisis would help us go back to the drawing board and say, look, let us look at our constitutional architecture and find out whether presidential first, but the goalpost is the best thing in our electoral system, or should we adopt another system which is parliamentary, where you introduce more proportional representation. Proportional representation is now very minimal. We have women represented in the Senate through proportional representation, and called marginalized and so on. It's a very timid attempt to bring in proportional representation in our constitution. We should go further than that, than like the Germans. Yeah. So I really think that this crisis should give us an opportunity to relook at the architectural framework of our constitution for having a truly democratic governance after elections. So whatever the results myself, like the president is Ametigal, you know, I think to me it will not make a difference until and unless we sit down after this crisis and revisit our constitutional architecture for election to really produce democratic governance in this country.
All right, David, you've been quiet for a while. So, and Professor's solution cuts across both sides, whether the election is upheld or quashed. He still reckons there must be constitutional reforms.
Yeah, I would not even belabor that point. I think it's as well put as it should be. However, should the election be upheld, which was the original question you asked, then I would request President Uhuru Kenyatta to avoid any form of retribution. Because retribution is what happened after the 2005 banana-orange thing. Kibaki then decided to kick out everyone who was pro the orange movement and remain with the banana. That built anger. There wasn't violence, but that built anger. And in 2007, 2008, because of that, there was, the country was so tense, it was just always going to go over. So I would advise caution. I would advise him to embrace peace and to listen, and to ignore the ambitions of others, concentrate on his own, legacy. Because unlike 2005, this time we've already made a very healthy down payment of violence, of anger. So any form of retribution and persecutions would only but aggravate this the more. However, I'd also like to request that moving forward, they must be able to, should this be upheld, and even if not, and we had new election and a new, architecture, we must, as much as possible, try to promote decentralization and strengthen devolution. Commit more funds to the devolved units, even as we work on fixing the fabric, the social fabric of the country that seems to be very shaky and wavy at this time. And we must deliberately reach out to make all Kenyans feel part of this government.
Maalim? Because, either way, half the country is going to feel disenfranchised.
I think one thing is not questionable. I think the verdict most people know what the verdict is going to be. And
Do they?
Even those of us who have got
I don't. Let's just make that clear here.
Even those, you see. Let me tell you one thing. Law, you know, there is what you call the positivist law, which is basically the law is the law. It's indeterminate. Basically, it's universal and it has no time limit, and it's the law. But then there's the powerful, you know, school of jurisprudence, which basically says law does not live in isolation. It does not live in a vacuum. It lives within the society. So you take societal interest. You saw how Justice Odunga made a ruling some time back. You know, one of the most brilliant legal minds we have in the country here. When those the returning officer's issue was, he did not shoot it down and said no. But he said he can't shoot it down because there is a societal interest. Okay. Now, having come out of 2 elections, I don't think it looks that prudent to force the country into a 3rd election. So the judges are going to see and look at it from a political standpoint and say, what is this going to be, the effect of this on the society and the nation at large? Okay. And most likely say, let's have a process. I would love it if they say, look, this thing was as messy as the first one, but we are looking at these other schools of jurisprudence and go at length to educate Kenyans on that and say, we will not nullify these elections. But it's important for the political actors to come together and heal this country. Okay. You see what I mean? Yeah. It's a ruling that the judges can make from the bench. All right. Now, having said that, I want to concur fully with Governor Professor Anyang Nyong'o, that we need to change this system. This presidential winner-take-all system itself is so bad for us that we will be getting from one cycle of a conflict to the other cycle. This country will never grow. All right. So let us have the parliamentary system, which essentially is the leader of the party that has the biggest numbers of members of parliament is the one who forms the government. And in most cases, invariably, he does not have that absolute majority. He has to look for coalitions. Okay. And the coalitions can even be grand coalitions, like the one we had, the coalition government, which basically performed better than any other government that I know of. All right. But having said that, finally, I want to tell you one thing. I think the president has started off on the right footing. What he has done is he has gone back to that old sage who has been part of the Kenyan political construct for more than 40 years, 50 years. You know, 15 years being the vice president of 13 years, I can't remember how many years. And before that being a cabinet minister and being a president, Moi. Yeah. And Moi was gifted. Okay. When he sees the country is at the edifice, we are just about to drop off from the cliff. Moi had always perfected the art of bringing Kenyans together. Okay. He did that with the NDP. Was the NDP one time? He did every time there was a crisis. Moi reached out. Okay. We did that with the IPPG. Every time. So this business, this side of Jubilee, which is hell-bent on saying, you know, at any rate, it doesn't matter how many corpses we are going to crash and stand on, but there has to be a winner and a loser, is a problem. But I think what he has done right now, the meeting with Moi in itself speaks volumes. Okay. And I'm very confident that Uhuru will reach out to the other side of the divide and see how this country can be healed. Right. Shem, very briefly, I have to go to social media and see what Kenyans are saying.
Yes, Trevor, we can't overemphasize enough the need for conversation. I agree with Professor and Farah on one aspect, but don't agree on another. That winner takes all is not right. I am a firm believer in mixed proportional representation. It's the way to go. As to whether we need to go parliamentary or remain presidential, I think that's something that we still need to talk about. Okay. But again, having said that, I think the fact that there are Kenyans, like the national mediation team, that's already taking this a step higher. It seems every colleague on the table already foresees what's likely to come out of the court case. Because for me, I'm not too sure. It's still 50-50. It could go either way. But my premise is whichever way it goes, all the parties need to respect that verdict. And people also need to restrain. Whether they rule in favor of Jubilee or in favor of NASA, the aggrieved party need to be restrain their supporters. I think that's
one last one.
Yes.
And Professor and my good friend here, my former deputy speaker, this is one of the best opportunity now to meet them and raise this issue. I remember even during the referendum in 2005, I met Raila in the corridors of Parliament, and I told him that the system that you are advocating, in the US, it is called spoil system kind of government, the presidential system. And I told him it will boomerang against you. You must be very careful when you pushing the constitution. At that time, they did not have time to listen. On several occasions, if you go to the answer, I did raise that in 5 or 6 years, people will complain against this kind of a system. But remember that time, people were creating constitution, the so-called, for themselves, thinking they can look out other people. And today, I want to mention to Professor that even when we are thinking about referendum in the future to correct this constitution and to strengthen it, arising from the challenges that we've gone through, I want to revisit the issue of IEBC because it was a negotiated process. They must start becoming serious and more concerned. And they must start having early warning system when they are coming up with issues. You see now, an IEBC, these are current commissioners, it was a negotiated process. 6 months down the line, then you are complaining about the same thing. The constitution that you are advocating for, that you are pushing for it, then 7 years down the line, it has challenges. I think when they are pushing for anything, they must do more consultation, and it should not be interest-driven. It should be public good that drives their motives.
All right.
Then they will make a decision that can last for posterity.
Can I make a correction?
Yes, Prof.
Yes. I was Secretary General of the ODM when the position of the ODM was a parliamentary system. The Bomas draft, which was parliamentary.
Absolutely.
That's what went to Naivasha. When they came from Naivasha, and I wasn't there, by the way, and the leader of our delegation was reporting to us in the Prime Minister's conference room, I was there. When they said that they had gone and compromised the presidential system, the whole room went quiet. I was shocked. I was completely shocked because our position was a parliamentary system. It was very clear, and it's a record. And by the way, I've been writing in the paper since the 90s, first for the Sunday Nation, then from the Standard, and now for the Star. And I'm very consistent on the parliamentary system of government. I can get you those essays. In fact, now I want to put them together and make a very strong argument that parliamentary system of government is best for Kenya for building democracy. Mind you, our goal is a democratic society. Parliamentary system is just a political system that can deliver democracy.
Even one of your students was asking me yesterday when we were discussing that what happened with Professor, because you used to understand this thing when you were in the university.
But you see, if
she's called Miss Ellen Kimani Rugendo.
You should be reading. She's surprised. No, she shouldn't be. I mean, she should be reading my essays in the Star.
Yes.
And I've not at any time advocated the presidential system government. Never.
Okay.
It's very clear. So please.
I have to take social media reaction.
I want to weigh in on this.
No, because there's this you believe. It's a typical Jubilee argument that when we say something, we say it because we are self-interested. If we were self-interested, we would not have suffered for the second liberation. At the point when I was being told in 1988, go for Q voting because Moi is going to be in power forever, and I refused. And for that I was punished. So look, don't revise history. History is very clear. Now, saying that, oh, we are just doing it because self-interest, it's just avoiding the debate. The debate is, which is best for Kenya today? And it doesn't matter what people say.
Professor, I support your argument completely. I'm not saying that you're doing it for self-interest, but what I'm saying is that it must be well thought for posterity. I think because if it was well thought, then we could not be complaining today. You should have even joined the no camp. You should have joined the no camp because we decided to go and we said this constitution is wrong.
But Maalim, Kutuny has a point. If it was great from the
we lost on that one, Peter. We lost on that one.
We lost on that one
because of internal ODM rift.
Yes.
Yeah. Just
we lost on that.
ODM rift.
Oh, yes, because of the Kalenjin Rift Valley and the, and the Mao Forest and all those kind of stuff. You remember that?
So then you admit
it. We lost on that, and we also lost on something else. We also lost on the devolved units.
Yes.
Because this 47 was never
never our position.
Was never our position.
Okay.
So all of them, we're taking, and we can take responsibility for that. Prime Minister cannot escape that. William Ruto cannot escape that. Of course, the mountain region was not for that idea. I can assure you that time. But because of that split, then we lost the numbers, and then it's basically that's how the beginning of Jubilee came together.
Exactly. Very briefly,
we need
David.
to appreciate.
Let David finish, then I'll come to you.
We need to appreciate that we are in a come we stay kind of situation. That this perceived marriage is not marriage at all in this country, and that the only way to resolve this come we stay and probably make it a marriage worth living in for the rest of the lives of the Kenyans is to have the presidential system, and that the faltered steps may have been there
to have the parliamentary system or presidential system.
I mean, a parliamentary system, and that the faltered steps may be there, but moments as this such tough moments, are moments of introspection and reflection. Reflect on it and say, where did we falter? What's good for the nation? What's good for the ambitions of William Ruto in 2022, even as it dismisses the hue and cry by the opposition today? What's good for Kutuny later? What's good for Dr. Shem Ochuodho if you'd want to run for the presidency at another time? What's good for the nation? Not even just the political ambitions. What's good to check and grow democracy? The answer is the parliamentary system.
All right. Shem, very briefly.
Trevor, I wanted to disagree with our presenting that the panacea is the parliamentary system to our democratic practices. I also want to take the issue that I don't think elections are our only problems. I think Kenya has got a much bigger problem. The historical injustices and Agenda 4, for me, far outweigh even the issues of elections. Why do I say parliamentary system is not a panacea for even the electoral system alone? If we are talking about free and fair elections, for me there are critical issues, about 6. The first one that we must address is the fact that the 30% of Kenyans who don't have IDs and so on, those must be brought into the bracket. The second one is the issue of multi-partyism. We must find a mechanism where we have multi-party, even in Central, in Nyanza, because without multi-partyism, we really cannot be talking of democracy. Thirdly, for me, is the issue of party primaries. We must have free and fair nominations if we're going to improve our electoral system. Fourthly, the role of money in politics. We must have a cap. The fact that you must be a billionaire to lead Kenya, or to be a governor, or to be an MP or whatever, is wrong. We must level the playing field. What am I trying to say? I'm saying there are so many considerations. It's not just parliamentary versus presidential.
So you don't think that will be a fast solution, even towards the right direction?
To support your argument, this thing, the solution is very simple. Even if we are going to remain with the presidential system. But it should be like the presidential system in the US. When I'm running for president, let me also run for Senate. So then when I lose presidency, then I can be a senator. And I can take my right position in criticizing the government. So you see the current position of, you know, this formation, when you have Mbadi, when you have somebody else from this other side who has not that capacity of the person who becomes the president, then it becomes difficult to check the president. So the president, the leader of opposition, either in the Senate or the National Assembly, should be the person with that capacity of becoming the president. So I think it is simple. That is going to be the long-term solution.
Trevor.
I really appreciate social media comments.
But I would wish Raila to be the leader of the minority.
Even in the States, you cannot run for 2 offices at the same time. The only difference is if you have been a sitting senator, and then you run for the presidency or sitting governor, you have the option of going back to your job if you lose. So that's why you see Senator McCain and Hillary.
But here we can have, if I'm running for president, let me also be allowed to run for senator.
No, you can't run for 2 offices at the same time. If you have been a senator before.
I'm just saying, for our political environment, you can be allowed to run for president, at the same time run for senate. So then when you get one, then you forgo the other. And then you remain also in the political arena.
All these things can be cured by a parliamentary system and proportional representation. Because my friend Shem says that you want multipartyism. multipartyism will be much better than the parliamentary system. Because when you have presidential system, you begin to say, oh, this community we are supporting so and so as a president. Then if you want to support another person, even if you come with another party, you can't get there. But with the parliamentary system, you'll have the multiplicity of parties who elect, and then you go to parliament, form coalitions. Even with the free primaries and money and all that, they will be tremendously reduced when you have a parliamentary system.
Professor, can you tell us also the other side of the parliamentary system? Considering the principles that governs our politics in Kenya, where we've got ethnicity and money.
No, but you see, the thing
I put it in
but that will be
resolved by parliamentary.
No. Gentlemen, let me make you a promise. We will come back here and talk about the parliamentary system.
If you consider parliamentary system with the Kenyan political situation, you will realize that it is not good. No, I want you to do a bit of research on that.
I will give you an essay written on that, by the way. Then we can...
I've also done an essay.
Gentlemen, let's agree on one thing. Let's agree on one thing. On Monday, next week Monday, I'll have the same panel. Let's talk about the parliamentary system. Those of us who have to do research will go and do their research. But I want to thank you so much for coming this morning. Honorable Joshua Kutuny, Member of Parliament Cherangani, Dr. Shem Ochuodho, Global Leader, Kenya Diaspora Alliance, Professor Anyang Nyong'o, Governor Kisumu, David Osiany, Political Analyst, and Dr. Farah Maalim, former Deputy of the National Assembly. I know you're not a doctor yet. I'm just wishing you well. So just wish me well, but I know you're not there yet. You'll get there. But Usha is here with the social media. That's why we're going to close the comments from the Kenyans, because that is where the sovereign power lies. Usha, what are they saying?
Right, Trevor, we are out of time, so I'll only be able to say what a few people are saying. We have Samora who says, the Kenyan church has let Kenya down, the Kenyan government has let Kenyans down, but most importantly, Kenyans have let ourselves down by continuously failing to look at the best interest of our country and focusing on tribal affiliation. We also have Adera who says, if we don't find a solution to our crisis in Kenya, we are likely to be worse than Zimbabwe. We have Samuel who says, but besides the leaders leading us into the difference we're in, what have we done as citizens of the country to prevent what we are experiencing? We have Andy who says, when rights are treated as a gift, we are in a dictatorship. We also have Mugo who says, it would have cost the government nothing if they allowed Raila supporters to welcome him in whichever way, as long as peacefully. We have Mutali who says, we have to rectify our political culture. Our current political culture breeds hate, greed, tribalism, and state deniability. And finally, we have Jora who says, if our leaders are confined in a house for a week, Kenya will be peaceful. They are the cause of division. Of course, a lot more tweets coming our way, but in the interest of time, we won't be able to read them all. But the conversation goes on online, #AMLiveNTV. That is how you can keep this going. Trevor.
Thank you so much, Usha. I know you cut your conversation into half because of time. And I want to make Jasper Mogire a promise on Monday. Can someone explain how parliamentary system will promote democracy? How does this address the historical grievances, marginalization, inequalities, even in employment? Tune in on Monday. We'll explain everything you need to know about the parliamentary system. Thank you for watching. This has been The Point. My name is Trevor Ombija. Always a pleasure.
This Christmas, pay for your normal StarTimes bouquet.